Mr. Ziarko, isn't it? A cousin. Yes, I'm sorry, all the cousins blur together after a while. I'm sure you know it is the same. I'm glad to see you arrive safely. I was a little afeared, I'll be honest with you, that people would start arriving for the weddings, even though they're not for another 2 days yet. But nonetheless, welcome. And in case you don't recall, I am your cousin Elizabeth Braxton, the mother of the brides. So I hope your journey was pleasant enough. You must forgive me, I am a little bit distracted. All of the last-minute plans for the weddings and any number of other things. I was actually making a list. I know this is not the day, these are not the ceremonies the girls would have wished, but times being what they are what we must have. Certainly nothing like their sister Molly's wedding some years ago. Goodness, Molly was married 5 years ago now, back in '73. But with the war on, of course, things have to change, don't they? Mind you, it will still be a very pleasant celebration, and I can assure you, my husband managed to secure several pipes of Madeira, so there would be plenty to be had. But I think the girls would have wished a day to themselves, each to themselves, I should say. But they will manage, and they neither will be married in the silk that their sister was married in, trying to display frugality and economy and so on and so forth. I just hope none of the neighbors complain. I still don't understand it. I mean, I understand that in '74, 4 years ago now, we adopted the association, no more importation from Britain. Pinching the pockets of the merchants in England will solidify our rights given the power that they have over Parliament. I understand that well, but what difference does it make? What difference does it make whether I have a fine celebration if I can afford it? And what right does my neighbor have to tell me what I can and cannot have if it is in fact mine? But nowadays, everybody's looking over everybody's shoulder, at least around here. You don't want to find yourself brought up before the so-called Committee of Safety, be declared an enemy to liberty. But we will be frugal. I promised my husband, but I will also give my girls the days they deserve. And it's just so many things have changed lately, haven't they? I mean, we've been fortunate here in Virginia. I know you don't always spend your time in Virginia. You spend a fair amount in Maryland, and I assume it's nearly the same there, but we have not been much touched by the war directly. Oh yes, the shortages and certainly the inflated monies, but nothing in regard to battles or anything of that nature. But it's going to be a very different situation than what I had hoped. I'll tell you what I'm most worried about, though, is dinner tomorrow night. All of the family that is in the area is coming by for dinner, and then the weddings will be the following day. But that means not only the brides and grooms, but also my husband and myself, and now certainly you and your lady, but also my father, and I'm sorry to tell you, only one of the girls' uncles will be able to be in attendance. My 2 brothers, Richard and Thomas, have now gone off to England. Don't feel safe here anymore, they say, or they said before they left. Oh, did I tell you George is going to be here? My son George, who was at the grammar school at the college, yes, he's going to be here now. On the one hand, I'm glad to have him home. On the other hand, I worry about what to do about his education. He's not at the college now because, for the most part, there really is no college now. And quite honestly, even if there was, I don't like some of the influences there, one way or the other. So he is home. So now we must decide, what do we do with the boy? I suppose we could send him to a college in another state, but I don't want him so far away with war on. I could send him off to England, just like my father sent off all of my brothers for their schooling, but you will agree with me, I think, now is not the time to be sending a boy to England. Or we could have him tutored at home with his brothers and sisters. By the by, if you hear of someone looking for a position as a tutor, please let me know. We are beginning to despair of that. Back to my list. I was making a list of some of the most remarkable things. I was making a list of conversation topics for dinner. Because for the life of me, I can't figure out how it is that I am going to be able to keep politics out of the conversation in the next coming days. And I know I'm telling tales on no one. You know my husband signed the Declaration of Independence back in '76, 2 years ago now. You know his name is on that document. And I'm sure you heard the rumors about my father and my brothers. And they don't hold with American independency. Now, mind you, Daddy will be the first one to tell you that we have been wronged by the king and by Parliament. He will be the very first. But what he doesn't agree with is how to come about a reconciliation. He doesn't think independency is the right answer. And yet now, if we don't have independency, if this war is not won by the so-called patriots, my husband will hang. And I am just fearful of what the conversation at dinner is going to be like betwixt my husband and my father and my brother. Thank goodness it's my brother Gowan. He is much more pleasant in matters of such things than my brother. You remember my brother Richard and how contentious he can be. And so I was making a list of topics, trying to determine how I can steer the conversation away from that. How long can you talk about the weather?
I'm certain we could talk about the weather for some time here in Virginia. But we actually have some other cousins here who are going to be asking questions.
Certainly, and welcome all, please.
And cousins from all over, California, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, Kentucky. But we will get to some of their questions and concerns. But before we even get into that, what has changed that is causing all of this turmoil? I mean, both here for you and your family as well. This tension with our former mother country has been going on for a while now.
And that is just it, Cousin Joe. That is exactly it. It is the tensions with the mother country. And what has changed? Well, I'm going to be honest with you. The truth of the matter is all that's really changed is who's in charge. Most of the laws remain the same. But again, everyone looking over everybody's shoulder, as I said, making certain that your neighbors are adhering to the letter of the, I can't even call it law, because some of the bodies that are putting these suggestions in place aren't even legal bodies. They're extra legal bodies. They're outside the law. I'll use the example. I mentioned importation, and I will use that as an example. Of course, we're not importing from England anymore. We're at war with them. But speak to my husband later, by the by. He is a plan afoot with the Morrises in New York to trade with France and Holland. But as I was saying about the association, we determined we would not trade with England any longer. And so what comes from England? You know as well as I do, everything does. And so when we said we could not do that any longer, all of a sudden everyone became very curious. Oh, is that new glass in your window, Mr. Jefferson? Is that new? Is that a new gown I see, Mrs. Braxton? New knives, Mr. Page? Herrings and thread, Mr. Purdy? Everyone looking over everybody's shoulder. And really, what business is it? It's your own and nobody else's. And I think, to a certain extent as well, the temperament of people have changed.
I think that war will do that. Here we have questions from several other cousins. Denise would like to know, would you say that most women fall on the side of the patriot or on the loyalist side? Do you think that women differ from their husbands or fathers or children?
Well, Denise, I will say this. In my experience, there are as many opinions as there are people. And please do not let it be said that I do not support my husband. I most certainly do. I am just worried. I am worried as a mother and a wife and a daughter. I cannot speak to others' opinions. I only know my own heart. And I will tell you that there are people out there who will change their opinion depending on who they're talking to. But as we are friends here, as we are cousins, I thought to be frank and honest today. Do women agree with their husbands or disagree with their husbands? Of course women disagree with their husbands. Do you know, my mother told me, and I've got to remember to tell this to the girls, my mother told me before I married, she said, Betty, she said, sometimes your husband will ask for your opinion and you'll give it. Sometimes he won't ask it and you'll give it anyway. And sometimes you can phrase your answer in such a way that he never realizes that your opinion wasn't his to begin with. The important thing is not whether or not I agree with my husband. The important thing is that I support him. And as for loyalist, patriot, I don't know that we will ever truly know numbers as to who supports what. Trouble is, right now, everybody feels the absolute need to choose a side.
You started kind of touching on this, but Doug was wondering, what are your fears for your children in this uncertain time?
Well, I think every parent fears for children, don't they? And we have been blessed. We have 9 living. 2 of those are my stepdaughters. I am more worried about my children now than I have ever been before. I am particularly worried about their future. I mentioned already my husband, Carter Braxton, his name is on that Declaration of Independence. If the American side does not win the war, my husband will be tried for treason and he will hang. And what happens to the property of a traitor? It goes to the crown. And so my children's inheritance is no longer secure. And now I must think of, I spoke of my son George. Now I must think of what to do about George's education, not just for his education's sake, because there could become a time now where instead of inheriting the plantation that my husband has intended for him since he was small, now he might have to find another way of earning a living. And I worry about the girls, certainly. Their choice of husbands and wives is always something parents worry about. But my daughter, Betsy, who is getting married in a couple of days, her husband's 3 years younger than I am. He fought at Harlem Heights, on the American side, by the by. He was wounded. We do not think wounded in so severe a manner, but you never know when an old injury might do you harm. So we've made certain they have a house, and that will go to her if something happens to him. And I worry about the world that my children will inherit, and the lack of civility that I see around me all the time nowadays.
We actually have 2 questions here, which you got very close to, but I want to make sure that we ask them.
Apparently I can read my cousin's minds.
Yes, very well. Very well done. Denise was just asking which one of your daughters is getting married and to whom. So you were just speaking on one, but...
So my second stepdaughter, Judy, she is getting married, and she is marrying John White, and they will live in King William County. His father is a minister of the Church of England, Alexander White. And my younger daughter, the younger of the 2 getting married, is my oldest girl, Betsy. She is marrying Samuel Griffin, and they will live here in Williamsburg. She's the one I made certain had a house.
Once again, reading your cousin's mind, Tina was wondering where they would live after they were married, and there you have it. Aaron wanted to know, how long have you been married? We've been talking a lot about the marriage of your daughters, but we haven't talked about and we've talked about your husband, but not your marriage.
18 years now.
18, wonderful, wonderful. Were you married here in Williamsburg, or?
No, it is customary for brides to be married out of their homes. Occasionally you'll meet someone. I have a cousin who had a wedding here at Bruton Parish Church, the Randolphs, but it is more customary for a bride to be married from her home.
Very good. And if there are any other cousins who have questions, please feel free to send those in so Mrs. Braxton doesn't have to keep reading your mind. But we have a few others here. Jessica says that she too has to steer clear of politics at the dining room table and was wondering if you had any advice.
Jessica, I think we need to have a conversation together. It's a strange thing, isn't it? I know one of the things you teach your girls growing up, I'm sure you were taught it, I most certainly was, is the art of conversation. And we are always told certain topics to avoid at dinner, and I'm sure you can name them along with me: politics, religion. And usually we can steer away from those. But it has just invaded absolutely everything nowadays. And I find for myself that even if I think I am steering it down a safe road, someone will bring it back around. And that is why, as I said, I have started to make a list. The weather is chiefest on the list. I have tried, the other thing I wrote down is, strangely enough and thankfully, I received a letter from my brother the other day, and so I can bring up the letter. The trouble is, where is he right now? He's at school in England, so that might steer us down the wrong path. But I think the chiefest thing that we can do is prepare in our minds and try to have something else ready that can be discussed, or set the children to demonstrating something. If you've got little ones around, oh, show Uncle Gowan that painting you did the other day, or sing that song you learned, and hope it's not Rule Britannia.
That would cause even more waves, I'm sure. We have two questions here. Mason's asking about your accent, and Jessica was wondering where you're originally from. Are you Virginian originally, or did you travel here from somewhere else?
Born and raised in Virginia. I have only ventured outside of Virginia on one occasion, and that was back in '76 when my husband went to the Congress in Philadelphia, and I accompanied him.
Wonderful. Now, Denise was wondering, you mentioned stepchildren. Now, is this your second marriage, his second marriage, both?
My husband's second marriage. His mother died when he was born, and he was erroneously reported as dying along with his mother, which thankfully he did not. But his father died when he was still quite a young man, and he found himself then a young man with a somewhat inattentive guardian and a large fortune. And so he married young the first time. Married a young lady the same age as he, Miss Judith Robinson, and they were only married for a little more than 3 years. She gave him 2 daughters, my stepdaughters Molly and Judy, and shortly after Judy was born, she too paid her debt to nature. Then he went off to England for a couple of years, to forget, I don't know, to continue his education. But when he came back, suddenly I was not the troublesome little neighbor child that I had been before. He is 8 years my senior, and we wed not long after he got back. I was 16.
Wonderful. Todd was wondering something a little bit heavier. What has been your greatest life challenge? And have you suffered any property damage because of this unrest? Has your family suffered anything specifically due to this current unrest?
We, the Braxtons, have not suffered any damage to our property. I suppose it depends on what you mean by property. No damage to our possessions. We have had a few plantation slaves run to the British, so we have lost them. They are not damaged, but they are gone from us. Earlier this year, my husband had a ship that was transporting Virginia and North Carolina tobacco to France to be sold to bring back salt and molasses and sugar and other necessities, and that ship was captured. But you have probably heard of some people who have had property physically damaged. My father has not sustained any damage to his property, nor any of my brothers, although my brother Richard, one of the reasons he has now gone to England, was threatened with tarring and feathering. And 2 of my brothers have been disarmed, one for not swearing a loyalty oath. The other one had been imprisoned here in Williamsburg, house arrest, but nonetheless imprisoned, for having in his possession a letter from a known loyalist. He finally got his freedom when he argued that at the time the letter was written, we were all hoping for reconciliation still. And he is exiled to one of my father's plantations in Caroline County. He is to appear before the Virginia Convention when called for, and he had to post 10,000 pounds sterling in bond. So no damage to his property, but certainly to his reputation.
And Linda was wondering, did women of a lower class get treated the same as a women of upper class? Some of these troubles, do you think it's exclusive to you and the fact that your family's very well known here in Virginia, or do you think that women of a lower class have less protection when it comes to their political opinions?
If you are scraping by, and I can say I thank God that I have never been in this position, but if you are scraping by, Linda, from day to day to eke out a living, I wonder how many political opinions you have. I do not know that you have much time to ruminate on it. And the lowest of the classes, certainly the men do not hold the vote. There is a property requirement for voting in Virginia. I think in some ways my status in society, my position as you have called it, affords me a protection, but in other ways it also makes me an easy mark.
Okay, we're going to change gears a little bit here. It's been somewhat heavy, and we've had a slew of questions about the wedding itself. So I'm going to throw a few of these at you kind of quickly. So first is, what would the celebration look like tomorrow? You mentioned kind of what a typical wedding looks like. What are your specific plans?
Well, the wedding is 2 days from now, but the morning of the wedding there will be a breakfast for the family and the bride and groom, and so brides and grooms, and so forth. The ceremony will be performed at the house. The girls have new gowns, cloth imported before all of this started, but in the latest of fashions, and not the fine silks that they might have worn in days past, but new at any rate. Betsy's has a very, very pretty green, and Judy's, her complexion is much, much different than mine and my stepdaughter. She has a color called Aurora. It is almost an orangey gold color. And so the wedding will be celebrated in the morning, and then we will have well-wishers come throughout the day and into the evening. There will be dancing. As I said, my husband did manage to secure several pipes of Madeira, so there will be plenty of Madeira and other spirits to be had, and there will be a bride's cake, which will be very, very large, and everyone will take part in that.
Wonderful. And so it's going to be held at your house?
Yes.
Very good. Do you know who will be officiating? Are you going to have the parish?
We were going to have it be just the St. John's, which is the parish in our neighborhood, but since John, my future son-in-law, since his father is a minister, he is going to be officiating, so the Reverend Alexander White. Wonderful.
And finally, how many guests do you plan on having through?
Whoever comes by.
Wonderful. So both Dave and Julie, I think, are interested in the fabric you mentioned. So they're asking what fabric is the dress and who made these gowns?
The gowns were made by a mantua maker that lives in West Point, because that is near to where we live. If you are at all familiar with Virginia, West Point in Virginia, not the one up in New York. And so they were made by a local mantua maker there. The cloth, as I said, was imported. I suppose I spoke a little erroneously. Betsy's gown is primarily green, but it is a chintz pattern, so it is a cotton, and the Aurora one is all Aurora, and it is a combination of mostly cotton, but with a little bit of silk woven in it. Gives it a very pretty sheen.
Very good. Jessica was taken, or not taken aback, but wondering how it was to become a stepmother at such an age. Did you find the transition difficult? And there was a question earlier from Denise asking about this fact that you had stepchildren. Is it uncommon here in Virginia to find these what we might call blended families?
Oh, not at all, no. And Jessica, I will tell you this, I never thanked God so much for younger brothers and sisters as I did the day I got married, because I knew what to do with the children for the most part. It was a little bit of a trial because their father had just come back from England. He had left the girls here. They were, 4 and 5 years old when we got married? He left them here with their grandparents, their mother's people. So they had to acquaint themselves not only with their father, but now with a new mother as well. And so it made for some difficult times. But they weren't the only ones struggling there, because the whole household had to reacquaint themselves with my husband and now myself. It wasn't just the children, but also the slaves he had left behind. And Denise asked for blended families, as you called them in Virginia. Not uncommon at all. Not uncommon at all. Especially if a wife should die. Those children, and there are children. Children need a mother. My own father, he was born of my grandfather's second wife. My grandfather married 3 times. His final wife survived him.
Wonderful. Well, we're getting kind of towards the end. We have a few more questions that we will be asking. But earlier you mentioned trading with England. Mm-hmm. Have you seen any changes on how the trade has been affected? Obviously, a war is going to affect that. Have you seen an increase of manufacturers in Virginia? These dresses seem to be the exception. How about daily items?
We have seen an increase in economies here in Virginia. Not economies, but industries here in Virginia. We have seen production of more cloth. That is why there's no lamb on the table anymore. Not that this is the time of year for lamb, but in the spring, no lamb on the table. We want to increase wool production. It is more difficult to get things, and the rise in prices because of that has been great. It's one of the reasons my husband and people like the Morrises in New York and others in Philadelphia, any large city as well, have been trying to gain trading partners with the French, with the Dutch, with anyone really. My husband has one ship that he says they're going to try to send to Norway. I barely had even, I don't know if you put a map before me, if I could even tell you exactly where that is right now. But he has said that there might be someone there who is willing to trade for good Virginia tobacco. So we are not getting the things from England anymore because we can't, because we are at war. Now there are always smugglers, let us be honest. I do not hope to trade in that, but you can also say that there are some who might consider it all smuggling now, if they do not consider that we have broken from England. Yeah. But it's coming from other places. It just takes longer, and it is more expensive.
A transition back, another question about marriage, husbands, and the like. Carolyn wants to know, did the brides choose their husbands? Or did the families have a say? Who's really making the call on this?
In my grandmother's day, I would say marriages are more or less arranged. Today, I would say you arrange for your children, Caroline, to meet those that are appropriate. But the choice is ultimately, in our family anyway, the choice is ultimately the choice of the young people. Now, I have never heard anyone say, you will marry so-and-so. I have heard, and I think you know the case that I am speaking of, I have heard some that say you will not marry a certain person. A cousin of mine, Miss Randolph, had an affection when she was younger for a young man by the name of Thomas Taylor Bird. The Birds and the Randolphs both were apprehensive, to say the least, and one might say downright against the match. And so Mr. Bird wrote it into his will that if there should be a union between those two young folks, that his son would be disinherited to the point of a shilling. So you arrange that your children meet the proper, and for all of you young folk, all you young cousins that I see out there, always take your parents' advice in this, because as much as you would like to believe it, you can't live on love alone.
Thank you for some of that advice. There's some folks who are intrigued by this idea of the shortages and the smuggling. And Nick is wondering, with all the shortages, with all this smuggling, do you find yourself supporting said smuggling to get those products? Or do you still think that it is an unrespected occupation?
I hope we have never used smuggled goods. However, if it comes to a point where I must decide of not being able to salt and smoke all of the food that I am going to need for the next year, or buying smuggled salt, I will support my family, I will support our people, our plantations, and I will take that smuggled salt.
Is salt the greatest shortage right now?
It is one of the chiefest, it is a necessity of life. It is maybe not the greatest shortage, but it is the most necessary.
So Tina asked a bit ago, your husband has a great deal of property, so is his time spent more overseeing the property or being involved with politics? Because I believe you said that you went to Philadelphia with him upon the consideration of politics.
His time lately, he's now serving in the Virginia House of Delegates, our new government. And when he is away for business of politics, then that utterly occupies his time. He is also writing a great deal of correspondence lately, particularly as regards these ships that he is trying to encourage the trade of, as I mentioned, the ships, of course, being the vessels. We have overseers on our plantations. My husband has about, I think it's 30,000 acres of land. It's not all contiguous, it's not all one tract. It is divided up over several counties. And so he will have to sometimes ride out to a further piece of land to make certain that everything is progressing as need be. But there is an overseer on each piece of land, someone who is in charge of the maintenance of that property. And then, of course, some of the smaller ones, no overseers, just slave foremen instead. But I think there's only 2 small holdings where there are slave overseers alone. So it depends really on the time of year, what his business is engaged in.
And Lynn wanted to know how you and your husband met.
How we met? I don't remember not knowing him. He was a neighbor. I think he came to my father for advices at some point. But I really think we grew up about 5 miles away from each other. So as I said, when I was quite small, I was the pesky little neighbor child. But
all right, we're getting down to the last maybe 2 questions, but they're going to be kind of harder, a real dive here.
Because planning 2 weddings isn't hard enough?
Exactly. We've tried to keep it a little bit light. But before we end our time with you, obviously you've thought about this, but will you be considered a traitor because of your husband's actions? And what does that mean? And when it comes down to it, do you consider yourself loyalist, a patriot?
In Virginia, the husband is the representative of the household. And so everything that falls in the public realm falls on his shoulders. The private realm is my domain, the household and so forth. I think, yes, I think the whole family will be branded traitors if it comes to that. I do not think I would suffer the same fate my husband would, as I have taken no particular steps. Though I have heard of, at least if it has not actually happened, I have heard of it being threatened in other places, that some women, some ladies have been threatened with tarring and feathering for their views. As to your other question about loyalist or patriot, I have to say that in my heart I have a hard time making a distinction. Those words, until a few short years ago, meant the very same thing. What could be more patriotic than being loyal to your country? Now, of course, they mean 2 very different things. What my views are, what my opinions are, matter really only within my own family. They do not matter on a public scale, as such as my husband's or my father's might be. But I suppose I feel this way. We've made our beds. We've got to lie in them. I just hope they're the right beds.
I think that leads us perfectly to the last question, which is, what is an ideal outcome, either of this wedding and the plans for tomorrow, or even in a larger sense? What is your hope for the future?
First of all, to get through the next couple of days with no maldigestion, that the children be happy in their future, the girls be happy in their choices and in their lives. But I think most of all, I want to see us return to a time of, I guess I'll call it civility. As British subjects, we've always prided ourselves on our ability to disagree with each other and with our governments. And I grew up, as you well know, I grew up the daughter of a man of politics. I am married to a man of politics. I am the sister of a man of politics, and I have no doubt that I will be that some of my boys will be engaged in politics, and I will be the mother of men of politics. And you show me two men of politics that always agree, and I'll show you a pair of liars. But we used to be able to put our differences aside for an occasion such as a wedding. And I don't know what it's like in the towns that you live in, but that doesn't seem possible here anymore. And I really wonder what changed and why. And I just hope for a day when we can all remember civility. And that just because someone holds a different opinions, I can assure you neither my husband or my father has horns and a tail. That we can disagree but do it with civility. I want an end to the fighting. I want an end to the bloodshed. I want a return to the days of my youth, and perhaps that's a little naive. And I do not mean that I wish to be younger, but I want a return to a time where it felt as though we all wanted what was best, and that we could be civil about it. And I pray that someday I get that. In the meantime, I know you probably wish to freshen up from your journey,
yes.
And I apologize for detaining you. And I must, Jessica, continue my list of topics so that we can avoid politics at the table. But please, thank you very much, and thank you for your assistance and so forth. And where did oh, there it is. And thank you very much for joining us for our live stream today. It is through the support of donors like yourselves that we are able to make these things available to you. Have a wonderful day.